Joining us now in Studio B to discuss, I'm sure, football and offensive coordinator stuff, but also basketball, because according to us yesterday, that's more on the mind than football right now, right?
For me, at least, yeah.
BYU basketball at 6-2. Greg Wrubell, the voice of the Cougars, is here in Studio B. Greg, welcome back.
Morning, boys.
You're dressed up.
You're looking very sharp.
Thank you for removing the tie. This is a tieless program.
Yeah, no, it's a game day,
Yeah.
and so I'm kind of already in game day garb.
Yeah, you're ready to go, man. You don't mess around. And it's a double game day, by the way. Women's hoops and then men's hoops. This is it's a ball night.
So
love it.
Ladies matinee followed by the men tonight, the Redbirds and the Cougs.
We'll be ready to go. Okay, what's the most intriguing part of the BYU-Illinois State matchup in your mind?
Probably how much Illinois State relies on the three and how intent BYU is on taking it away. Just a case in point, a UVU team that last year attempted 37 threes against BYU, got off 8 this year. Different years, different schemes, but clearly if that was an intent of BYU, mission accomplished. UVU went from 18 for 37 one year from the arc to 1 for 8 the next year. Could you see a more stark contrast? And Illinois State's very much the same. They're a 40-40-20 team. 40% of their points from threes, 40 from twos, and 20 from the free throw line. But 40 is a heavy number in terms of reliance on the three for their points. And they've got a good guy to go to. Keyshawn Evans has had 3 or more threes in 7 of their 8 games this year. Wasn't a starter last year, but he was ready to roll when this year started. He's a great player, and he's a career 41.3% shooter. And this year, he's shooting 50 from the field, 50 from the arc. He's tremendous. And so I think the intent tonight will be to make sure number 3 doesn't get off his threes. You can almost cheat off the other wings. The other wings are not high-scoring players. They're really reliant on Evans at the point, and then the 2 inside guys, including Phil Fain, who is a returning starter and is very productive inside. So it's an intriguing matchup. And again, if BYU's intent on taking away the 3, this is a good case study tonight.
When you first hear Illinois State, it doesn't really pop off. This isn't a program that maybe you've heard about, but this is actually a pretty good game for BYU at home, and the story behind the game is kind of fun, too. Yeah,
the story behind the game is the head coach last year just kind of threw it out there in a tweet. We'll play anybody. Come on, P5s, I want to play you, because they were a 27-win team that tied with Wichita State for the Missouri Valley title at 17-1 and didn't get into the dance.
Just crazy.
And so off of that, he said, come on, I'll play anybody. Let's go, home and homes. And the appeal was out to the P5s, if you will, the Big Six, I guess you'd say. But BYU gave them a request, and they responded, and this game is on. So this year in Provo, next year in Normal. The home of the Redbirds is in Normal, Illinois. So BYU's on the road to Normal. Aren't we all? Hopefully.
Yes, we are.
Next year.
This is one of the weirdest places ever, so this is great for BYU. Yeah.
So, Illinois State is, again, maybe not the cachet name, but people who know basketball know how good a program this is, and probably could have been a dance team last year. Lost in the second round of the NIT last year to Central Florida, but finished up with 28 wins on the year. Didn't return a lot of letter winners, but the guys that are starting now are certainly producing.
Hey, credit to their coaching staff and to Tim Lacombe for BYU lining this up as we are on the road to Normal next year.
It was like an online match service last year, basically. That's how it all came together online,
No, there are literally websites where coaches can put out stuff.
There is,
so it's the fill in the blank website or app.
Swipe right or swipe left.
Yeah.
Do you want to play us? Swipe right. McKay Cannon has introduced himself to BYU basketball fans with a major splash in his first 2 games. That said,
with a boom.
Oh, man, the Cannon blast. Are we putting too much stock into McKay Cannon given what we have seen in 2 games?
Well, the numbers may drop at some point. I mean, he's shooting percentage-wise, amazing numbers. His offensive efficiency is off the charts, but they haven't asked him to do a ton. But what he's done, he's taken 9 shots. That's a modest number over 2 games, right? But he's made 6. He's taken 4 threes. He's made 3. He's taken 10 free throws. He's made all 10. His assist-to-turnover ratio is 4-1. He's played 25.5 minutes per game over 2 games. What a perfect piece to add to your puzzle. Again, he doesn't have to be option 1 or 2 or 3, but he's option X, and he was the co-leading scorer at Utah State just by coming in and doing what was available to him. And again, the percentages may drop at some point. If they don't, we're in great shape. I'd love them to stay as high as they are. But just another guy that can play. I mean, we kind of not really glossed over, but when the Nick Emery thing happened, it's like, okay, next man up, move on, and let's just see who the rotation is going to be. But you miss you miss something when you miss Nick Emery. You can't just gloss over and say it's no big deal. It's a big deal. Now they get a guy who does a lot of what Nick did and could do for BYU, and in an unexpected fashion, BYU gets some really good personnel news.
McKay Cannon was a 4-point-a-game scorer at Weber State. So for him to be like in the double-digit range would be awesome, but he's a guy that we saw what he can do. I think that's what Utah State was. We saw that he could go for 17. He could make all 10 of his free throws. He can defend. And you're right, he replaces Nick Emery's production to some degree on this team.
The numbers you mentioned at Weber are kind of skewed by the fact that his sophomore year saw so much less playing time than his freshman. He was a 33-game starter as a freshman. Things changed within that program from freshman to sophomore year, and he wasn't as preferred an option. And so his numbers, diminished as a result. But I think that freshman year, as a true freshman, by the way, kind of showed what kind of player he could be and is. They started a rookie 33 times, and he produced for Weber State and Randy Ray.
What are realistic game averages for McKay Cannon in this BYU system this season?
He's sitting at he's at 12. What is he right now? 12 and a half. Yeah. If he were 8 to 12 in points per game, I think you're getting what you need from him. Yeah.
And I like the balance that he affords. So Utah State 17. If he goes for 17 again this year, great. If he doesn't, he's a guy that can do that. And we were talking before the season, especially when Nick Emery left the team. Okay, where's the depth on this team? How many deep is it? I think BYU was looking at kind of being 7 guys deep. BYU's kind of pushing 8.5 at this
8.5, 9 right now. Now it's 2 guards coming off the bench in Zach and McKay, and then 2 bigs off the bench in Dalton and Peyton. That's kind of your 9-man rotation preferred right now. Of course, Kajon and Ryland are in the mix, but that's kind of where you are now. You're to 8.5 and 9, where you were at 7.5 to 8 maybe before. And I love the fact that if he's playing alongside Eli and TJ and Yoli, there are prime scoring options on the floor with him. But what's left for him? Enough for him to score 17 at Utah State, 8 against UVU. I love the way it sets up. And again, after so many years recently of just kind of personnel shots, bad news, hard hits that you take that you maybe don't see coming. How nice to have something drop in your lap, if you will, that really helps the team at an important time.
Yeah, amen to that.
A week ago we were chatting, and we had no clue that McKay Cannon would, 1, be eligible, and 2, would have an impact.
Yeah, well, today was game day last Wednesday, right? Yeah. And I remember I told you guys I was heading over.
He wasn't even eligible when you were here.
I was heading over to the UCCU Center for their shoot-around, and at their shoot-around, he's on scout team like he had been. And then a few hours later, he's in the mix and performing. It's a great story. I love it.
Yeah, knocking down 2 big 3-pointers in that win against Utah Valley.
And you know what? We didn't really talk about the intangibility, just the spirit, the energy, the tenacity, the moxie, all these things you want. He's a grinder, competitor, a little in your face at times. Maybe somebody that teams and their fan bases learn to hate a little bit, which is okay with me.
They need that.
So he does replace Nick Emery.
Indeed. Greg Wrubell, the voice of the Cougars, with us on BYU Sports Nation. We've talked a lot about BYU's scoring capability and that with McKay Cannon. How would you define this team defensively? Because they are, as a team, grinding out ugly wins.
Yeah, well, and to me, there's no such thing these days almost as an ugly win because, just get that W. And especially if you're at a place like the Spectrum, however you get that win is a pretty win.
Those seats are ugly, but the win was not.
The seats, I was told, are they meant to reflect the foliage in the fall? When you drive up the canyon, it kind of looks
like the quality of the team. Who knows?
Yeah. I know that they had the old Marriott Center left, the yellow seats would have fit right in there.
Thank goodness those are gone. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, BYU's defensive efficiency number last year wasn't terrible. I think people were under the impression that it's not. It wasn't terrible actually, but this year's is better, and they're they're more reliant on it. I think last year the objective was to essentially the best defense was oftentimes the highest scoring offense, the higher scoring offense, outscore people to win. And now you don't feel like it has to be that way necessarily. You can be at a spot where you're sitting at 9 points with 5 minutes to go in the first half in the Spectrum and be in the game. It may be not an unfair generalization to say maybe last year's team, had they endured a similar shooting drought, might have been more out of the game.
That's a loss.
And
That's
so
a loss.
The fact that they were grinding and keeping in the game, even when the shots weren't dropping, we've seen it a few times. It's kind of a trend, though, that when the shots aren't dropping, they're able to grind enough on the other end to stay in the game, and that's an encouraging thing.
I'm interested to see in the next couple of weeks where this BYU team's at, because right now, to me, this is kind of a young group, no seniors, implementing new schemes to see how they fare in real tests against, and this week those are good tests. But Utah's going to be a test. St. Mary's obviously, Gonzaga and whatnot. What's the next game that's kind of a litmus test for BYU in your opinion of where this team's at and what they can do?
Tonight. Really, I mean, Illinois State's already beaten South Carolina, a Final Four team from last year. Swept Tulsa. Tulsa's an okay team, but a couple of wins there. They've lost two good teams. This is a high-scoring team with excellent players. I think Illinois State's a really nice test. They're a top 150 Pomeroy team. Weber State neutral is, Dave's never lost to Weber State. Then the Utah game, of course. They're a top 50 Pomeroy team. That's the next big name that shows up before St. Mary's. But to me, every game is the litmus test, and this is the latest one to keep it rolling. You've won 3 in a row. Want to keep this thing going and just get the momentum really in your favor as you head into this in-state game on the weekend. Weber State's no slouch. They're a good shooting team, great shooting team, what some might say, and so I think it's a huge week for BYU, especially because they've played so well. Can you keep it going now and not have a setback and not have a drop back?
Well, it helps to build momentum when you have a guy like Yoli Childs. And maybe we should just call it Yo-mentum, because apparently his name is available for anything and everything if you want to spin those words. But that takes us to a stat that matters, Greg.
Yeah, let's get to it. So Yoli Childs' minutes per game number is up about 10 minutes per game over last year, and his fouls per game number is down by 1 foul per game. Now you say, what's 1 foul? Well, in college basketball, 1 foul could be the one that puts you on the bench. It keeps you from playing 16 minutes and you play 4 minutes instead in the first half. You get that second foul in the first half, you may not play much of the first half. And so minutes per game up from 25 to 35, fouls per game down from 2.5 to 1.5. The fact that he's fouling only 1.5 times per game and that Dave's not having to worry about taking him out in the first half. We just really haven't seen that this year, where he's got to yank him out. He plays a good number of minutes in the first half, solid complement in the second half. You get to 35 a game. If Yoli's playing 35 minutes a game and not in foul trouble, BYU can be a really, really good basketball team. And so, again, you say, what's 1 foul a game? 1 foul a game can mean a lot, especially if it comes early in a game. And so the fact that Yo is not fouling allows him to play a lot more, and when he plays more, BYU scores more and is better. And so, to me, that's the stat that matters right now with Yoli Childs. And let's not overlook just how great he's been. We talk about McKay Cannon's a great story, and Elijah's had a huge impact on this team now that he's healthy. But Yo is the motor. And they generate a lot of offense off his offensive rebounding. Now, the second chance points are almost entirely courtesy of Yoli Childs. Yeah. Dalton's really good at it too. But Yoli's offensive rebounds almost always result in a stick back. And by the way, Illinois State, they're not focused on offensive rebounding like BYU is. Let's see how that turns out tonight. Because when their shot goes up, you almost never see more than one guy around the basket. Everyone's getting back, and so they're defending against transition. How well and this is why BYU executing in the half court means so much against teams like Illinois State tonight. But Yo may do on the offensive boards what Illinois State doesn't seek to do on the offensive boards.
All right, it's that time, a time in which we hop on the Polar Express and go to the Great White North. It's a cool thing about Canada.
Okay. Countries, there's my hydro flask. I do drink from that.
Hydro flask.
Yeah. So countries have coats of arms and mottos. Of course, the motto of the U.S. is E pluribus unum,
Everyone
out of many, one. There's Canada's coat of arms, and you don't see the logo necessarily at the bottom there.
Is that a unicorn on the right?
Well, it may be, but let's not focus on that. Okay, the motto for Canada is Mare usque ad mare, and that is Latin for from sea to sea. Canada's motto is from sea to sea.
But not sea to shine.
No, you guys stole that. Yeah. But from sea to sea, from sea to sea is Canada's national motto. It's actually taken from Psalms 72:8, taken from a scripture. Yeah.
No. King James version.
Psalm 72:8. He shall have dominion also from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. Mare usque al mare. And that is the Canadian motto, and that's our cool thing about Canada for today.
Can we see that unicorn again? Also,
they're real.
That's not your water bottle. That's your hydro flask.
Yeah. Amare usque ad mare. Amare usque ad mare.
From sea to sea.
Very beautiful.
All right.
Greg, that was fantastic.
Do what we can.
Jerem's still focused on the unicorn, clearly.
Kristaps Porzingis is on the logo. That's incredible.
It proves they exist.
Hey, coming up, how well do we know Illinois State? We'll play a little Know the Foe.
Plus, BYU's all-time leading scorer Tyler Haws returns to Studio B.